All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is the Poetics of Mishnah, Themes and Structures with Dr. Abraham Wallfish and Rabbanit Adina Sternberg. It's a pleasure to be learning with you all again. This class is part of Drisha's ongoing Mishnah project, dedicated to the memory of a great lover and student of Mishnah, Rivka Rosenzweig, Zichronah Livracha. Before we dive right into learning, I just want to make sure people are aware I'm going to be sending out an invitation to panelists. If you choose to accept, you will be able to turn on your camera, show us your face if you want to, as well as unmute yourself to directly ask questions. I'll resend those invitations around momentarily. I strongly recommend, if you are in a place where you can do it, you do it. Though I do ask is, if you are not actively asking a question or speaking, to please mute yourself. And while there will be times when Dr. Sternberg takes questions, you can ask questions in chat. You can also ask questions in the Facebook comments if you are joining us on Facebook Live. And with that, it's a pleasure to have this class, which is being taught by Rabbi Dr. Abraham Wallfish and Rabbanit Dr. Adina Sternberg, alternating weeks. This week we are learning with Rabbanit Dr. Adina Sternberg. And with that, and source sheets will be posted momentarily in chat on both Zoom and Facebook Live.
Okay, so hello everybody, especially those with open cameras, and also those who don't have open cameras, but we'll be happy to have you listening. But I like to see the faces in front of me. Okay, so we're again in the Poetics of Mishnah, and in this semester we decided to broaden our view and not just deal with one chapter, but try to see a bigger scope of text at once. So today we're doing Psachim. Actually, this week I have two classes left. Afterwards, I'm giving this over to Rabbi Dr. Wallfish, and I wanted to talk about Megillah and I wanted to talk about Psachim. So the logical order was to start with Megillah and then go to Psachim, but I did want to finish off with Megillah because that will be closer to Purim. So we're going to do Psachim today, get you in the mood for Pesach, and then next week we're going to go back to Megillah and get you in the mood for Purim. So what we're going to do, just like we did in the previous weeks, the first thing we're going to do is just to learn Mishnah together. We're going to go over the text. We're going to get a feel for what's there, because today I'm going to try to go over, not overall, but give us a broad view over all of Masechet Psachim. I'm going to be skipping around a bit. Those of you who prepared, you saw I gave snippets from each chapter just to get a general idea, and then after we get the general ideas, there will be a couple of topics I'd like to discuss together. So, Kayla, did you turn me into a co-host? Okay, so I'm going to share screen. Second. Fit. Okay, you guys can see my wonderful. Okay, I hope you enjoy them. Take a long time to make them. Okay, so we're doing the Poetics of Mishnah, Mishnah Psachim, and we are going to start with some of the first chapter. Again, because I didn't want to put too much on the page, I brought here only the Hebrews. Those who need the English can print out or look at the pages I sent previously. So our Mishnah Psachim starts with the following Mishnah. So the evening before the 14th, we search for the chametz using the candle. So any place you don't put in chametz, you don't need to look for chametz. Great. There's a few lines that I skipped talking about exactly where yes and no. Mishnah Bet discusses en chosheshin shema girira chulda mibayit lebayit umimakom lemakom. We're not worried that a rat took our chametz from a house to a house or from one place to another. De'im ken michatzer lechatzer umeir leir, and we'll be worried that it took it from one courtyard to another courtyard, from one city to another city. And a davar sof, will have to be worrying forever that some chametz came here even after we checked, so we're not worried about that. You checked your house, you searched your house, everything is okay. Okay, I'm going to be, you guys are going to be helping me out here. Each Mishnah or a couple of Mishnayot, I want us to, as we did in previous classes, to give it a topic, give it a title. So what's the title of this, these two Mishnayot?
Preparation for Pesach.
Okay, so what did you say? You were talking together.
Oh, sorry, preparation for Pesach.
Okay,
First thing you
preparation
have
for
to do.
Pesach is a very broad title. Michael, what did you say?
I said, well, b'dikat makom, searching the place. I mean, makom repeats itself. Bodkin is
Okay,
the beginning, and makom is certainly, whether there's anything to that, but it certainly is a word used frequently in the two Mishnayot.
okay, wonderful. So you're using already the terminology. I won't be talking too much about the terminology today because we really don't have time for everything I want to do. But that's important to really notice what the words are, and it helps us also decide what the topic is. So the topic I wrote for myself is just searching for chametz, both in terms of time and in terms of place. So Michael noticed makom, and the different kinds of places, bait, makom, chatzer, ir. But we also have here, we started with the time. So we're going to be paying attention to this concept of time throughout our Masechet. So let's decide what time are we talking about in the Mishnah. Or le'arba'asar. So we're talking about the evening of the 14th of Nisan, okay? Meaning the evening before the 14th of Nisan. Anyone who's ever tried writing an invitation always knows that this is where we get into trouble, because you want to write the Hebrew date, but then if you write today, it's already in the evening, so it's not going to be today. If you write tomorrow, people are going to make a mistake. To my bat mitzvah, somebody came a day late because of this, not exactly for this reason, but yeah, you always have it on Hanukkah. Are you the fifth night of Hanukkah? You're on the fifth night of Hanukkah. We're already like the sixth. Whatever, it gets us too confused, right? Okay, but this is the evening of Yudalet, the evening before Yudalet. Let's continue to our next Mishnah. We're still in Perek Aleph. We're going to Mishnah Gimel. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Bodkin or 14, וב-14 שחרית, ובשעת הביאור. So Rabbi Yehuda gives us 3 points of time, right? You check on the evening of the 14th and on the 14th in the morning, and at the biur, which we'll find out later is a time when you're supposed to get rid of the chametz, which is noon of the 14th. וחכמים אומרים, לא בדק אור 14, יבדוק ב-14. If you didn't, for some reason, didn't in the evening, then you'll do it during the day. לא בדק ב-14, יבדוק בתוך המועד. You didn't check on the 14th, you'll check in the holiday. לא בדק בתוך המועד, יבדוק לאחר המועד. If you for some reason didn't do it throughout the holiday, do it after the holiday. ומה שמשייל, whatever's left over after you search for the chametz, יניחנו בצנעה כדי שלא יהיה צריך בדיקה אחריו. You put it somewhere on the side so you don't have to go searching for it again. I think we all know this feeling of Erev Pesach in the morning, right? שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים חמץ ומצה. That's the evening of the 14th. Your house is already Pesach, but you have this corner of the house where you leave all your chametz so that it doesn't get spread around. So that's לשייל ולהניח בצנעה, to put it on the side. So what's the topic of this Mishnah?
But you have to do it. The time is not the crucial entity.
It's not the crucial entity, but it really is very important, meaning we have all kinds of additional times. They can be obligatory. According to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda is one of the people who invented the Jewish OCD, right? He tells us to check it, or 14, and then in the morning, and then again, right? We're doing things again and again and again. Chachamim are saying, if you didn't check, okay, so we'll give you some other points of time. If you forgot, you didn't have the chance, you can make amends, but you don't have to check it 3 times. So we're still in the mindset of checking the chametz, but we're adding additional times. We have the evening, and then we have again the morning, and we also talked about Shata Biur. I put in parentheses during the holiday and after because that's what Chachamim add into the story, but it's only as a reply to what Rabbi Yehuda said. Rabbi Yehuda said you have to check 3 times. Chachamim say you have different opportunities. You just don't have to use all of those opportunities. If Rabbi Yehuda is a person who talks about OCD, Chachamim talk about those who never get things done on time, right? They didn't get it time in order to do that. So okay, so do it on the 14th. So you didn't do it on the 14th. We'll find some more time else to do it. Okay, so that was Mishnah Gimel. Let's continue to our next Mishnah. Mishnah Dav. Rabbi Meir omer ochlim kol 5 ושורפים בתחילת 6. ורבי יהודה אומר אוכלים כל 4 ותולין כל 5 ושורפים בתחילת 6. So we're talking here about different points in time, okay? During the day. We can eat all of the 5th hour and burn it at the beginning of the 6th hour, or eat only all of the 4th hour, wait around checking things out the 5th hour, and then you burn it at the beginning of the 6th hour. So just a point that we need to make, the hours here are based on a 12-hour day. Okay, so it begins at sunrise and ends at sundown. Some will say it begins when the light comes up and ends with Seta Kochavim, which is when we can decide that it's dark. And then you divide it by 12. This is what we call Sha'ot Zmaniot. It's kind of a sundial because it works according to how many hours of light we have a day, and it's not a 60-minute hour. So again, Rabbi Meir says throughout the 5th hour, you can still eat your chametz, but you start burning it at the 6th hour. And Rabbi Yehuda says, okay, Rabbi Yehuda was his OCD, right? He says, okay, you can eat only throughout the 4th hour. The 5th hour, we're going to be on edge, figuring out, yes, no, what's chametz, what's not. And then we can start burning on the 6th hour, the beginning of the 6th hour. So here we have, again, we're adding to our timeline. We have the 4th hour, the 5th hour, the 6th hour. I think you can feel already how we're proceeding throughout the day. Now, I skipped a whole bunch of Mishnayot at the end of the first chapter. They tell us of a sign that they made in the Mikdash to know the different points of day and different things that you can burn together because we're talking about Srifat Chametz. And we're now skipping to Perek Bet. What's the first Mishnah of Perek Bet? Kol sha'a shemutar le'echol, ma'achil lebehema lechaya u'le'ufot. So as long as you're allowed to eat, you're also allowed to give your animals to eat. To eat what? To eat chametz, right? As long as you're allowed to eat chametz, you can give your animals chametz to eat. You can sell it to the Gentile. You can use it in any way you want that you can get enjoyment from it. Avar zmano, once the time is up, asur behanato, you're not even allowed to enjoy the chametz. You're not even allowed to consume it in any other way, even if you're not eating it. You can't even use it to enjoy the way you burn it. You can't put it in your oven to increase the fire, because you're enjoying it, you're making use out of it. Rabbi Yehuda omer en bi'ur chametz el asrifa. So Rabbi Yehuda says the only way that you can get rid of your chametz, you need to burn it. וחכמים אומרים, אף מפרר וזורע לרוח, you can crumble it up and throw it in the air, in the wind, או מטיל לים, you can throw it into the sea. Okay, so tell me, help me out here, how would you define the topic of this Mishnah?
How to get rid of your chametz.
Okay,
what you can do with it up until you have to get rid of it.
Right, okay, so you wanted to say how to get rid of it, but then you're saying, is eating getting rid of it? By the way, the Mehadrin says the best way to get rid of chametz is to eat it, right? Then you don't have Baal Tashchi. So Mehadrin say that you're supposed to start getting rid of your chametz a whole month before Pesach. So what does it do? Have a big Suda for 30 days before Pesach, comes out on the 14th of Adar, right? And that's when people do a big Suda of consuming chametz, 30 days, right? It happens to come out on Purim, right? Okay. Anyway, Purim is the day that we eat a lot of chametz. Of course, it's also the day we distribute a lot of chametz to our neighbors. Anyway, so what we're doing is what you said. On one hand, the first thing you wanted to say is how we get rid of the chametz, but then you see that you can eat it and you can enjoy it, and only then you need to burn it, right? So we're trying to give a little bit more exact topic. I wrote that this is an elaboration of the different stages, because we saw that throughout the 4th hour you can eat it, and then the 5th hour we're not quite clear what we're doing with it, and then on the 6th hour we start burning. So here's a Mishnah said, okay, eating means you can also feed your animals, and when you're not eating anymore but you're kind of in this in-between stage, you can still enjoy it and sell it to the Gentile. And once you need to get rid of it on the 6th hour, now let's discuss how do we get rid of it. Do we have to burn it, or can we just crumble it up and spread it out, or do we have to, or can we put it into the sea, etc. But still, we're sort of, in a sense, all of these things are getting ready to get rid of our chametz. Okay. So in a sense, we're still in the same time zone that we talked about, the 4th hour, the 5th hour, and the 6th hour. Now, again, I skipped a few of the Mishnayot concerning the chametz that is given or sold or made as a collateral to the Gentiles, and we're proceeding and skipping to Mishnah Hey. Mishnah Hey goes as for such. These are the kinds of things that you can do to be yotzei, to fulfill your obligation on Pesach. Bechitim, beseorim, bekusmin, uveshifon, uveshibolet shuat. These are all kinds of different kinds of grains that are used for making matzah. Now we have a whole list of all kinds of different halakhically statused foods, but they're all talking about these different grains that you can use for making matzah. I skipped a bit. These are the kinds of vegetables that you can use. I did not check up all of these translations. You guys are welcome to do so. But these are all kinds of vegetables that can be used. We even have a hint here, the maror. They can be used for the maror. You can use them whether they're moist or dry, but not if they've been cooked or otherwise prepared and with different chemical ways. You can use different kinds of maror for your kazait. You can use it stem. Different halakhic statuses. Okay, so what topic would you give these two Mishnayot? Where are we now?
The food you can eat.
Right.
Okay, the foods you can eat, right? We talked about getting rid of what?
Or must eat.
Or must eat, right? It's not exactly just can eat, but these are the kinds of food that you need to eat, right? Now, we can call it materials, all right? Or however you want to do it, produce that's good for matzah and maror. Every time I read these Mishnayot, I feel like we're opening a shopping list, right? where let's write down what we need, right? In a sense, we cleared out our kitchen, we cleared out our house. Now we can start filling it with other things, right? Not like we do today. What do we do today? Today we start shopping for Pesach, I don't know, a month, 2 weeks for Pesach. And then we have this corner in the house where we start piling up all our Manischevitzes and all our baked goods and everything, right? But in the times of Chazal, you don't have all these refrigerators and cooling method. So what do? You get rid of your food, and then you start, now your house is empty, you can start bringing in your new food. You can go out to the store and buy whatever you need and start preparing for the evening. So in terms of our timeline, I would put it already after the 6th hour, we start preparing for the evening. We start, again, we do our shopping before. Most of us also start cooking before, right? We don't wait until we finish burning the chametz to start cooking, but there's a kind of a feeling that that's what we're doing here. We got rid of our chametz, now we can start preparing for the evening. Okay, let's continue. Mishnah chet. אין נותנים קמח לתוך חרוסת או לתוך החרדל. You're making your charoset. It came out a little bit too wet. You want to make it a little less moist. So what do you do when you're when you're making food and it's a little moist? You put in a little bit of grain. So let's put in some flour. Okay, a big no-no. Don't do that. Also, when you're preparing your mustard, most Ashkenazim don't necessarily eat mustard, but not when you're preparing the mustard. Ve'im natan ye'achel miyad. However, if you did, eat it right away before it becomes chametz, because flour itself is not chametz, right? Flour itself, you can make out of it matzah. You can also make out of it chametz. So it's a risk, but it's not already chametz. My father-in-law likes to say, you know what the closest thing to chametz is? Matzah, right? Matzah is the closest thing to chametz. So using flour can be okay, but it can also be a big no-no. So the Mishnah says eat it right away. Rabbi Meir doesn't even want you to eat it right away. No way, just throw it out or whatever. En mevashlim et haPesach, lo b'mashkim velo b'mei perot. You can't cook the Pesach because the Pesach is supposed to be a roast. Aval sachinu matbilin oto behem. However, when you're roasting the Pesach, you can, coat it on the outside with a little bit juice or something like that. Okay, a nachtom is a baker. Bakers, lots of times, when they're working on kneading the bread, the dough, they stick their hands in water. I've seen my mother do it with matzah balls. Right? You're making the matzah balls, you're trying to do them together. Every once in a while, you wet your hands, right? Now, what happens when you wet your hands and you have a little bit matzah meal on your hands? The matzah meal goes into the water. What happens when you do it if you have flour? The flour goes into the water. What happens when flour goes into the water? Big risk for chametz, okay? So you need to throw out the water. Now, I love these mishnayot. Why do I love these mishnayot? Because we're sort of going into their kitchens, right? We're mamish, after we looked on the refrigerator and saw their grocery list, now we're in their kitchen, we're watching them putting in a little bit flour into their charoset, wetting their hands while they're making the matzah. So if we need to try to give a title to this Mishnah, what title would you guys give it? Ruth, if you want to speak, we need you to unmute yourself.
Getting very close to chametz while you're trying to cook.
Right. Okay. So risky. We've gone, even though halakhically we didn't go with Rabbi Yehuda on the times of checking chametz, we're all totally Pesach OCD, right? Totally. So we don't do things like that, like actually baking with real flour Erev Pesach, right? We don't do such crazy things. My husband for many years would go with his Rosh Yeshiva and they would make the matzah for 14th of Nisan in the afternoon. Like I remember taking the kids to my parents already for the Seder, and my husband would join us, 5 minutes before Seder because he was busy making matzah. You know how stressful it is to make matzah Erev Pesach? Because it's like it's you either have something kosher or you have something chametz and karet. Like it's crazy. Okay, yeah. Not for those light at heart. Okay, so in any case, where are we? We have problems that we need to watch out for while preparing our food. Okay, we're making the charoset, we're getting the Pesach ready to be roasted, we're preparing our matzah, but throughout this whole time, we need to be light on our toes and be checking ourselves the whole time. Okay, so where are we? We're still after the 6th hour preparing for the evening. We're really gone into their kitchen and we're looking at what they're doing. Okay, let's continue to our next Mishnah.
If I can just throw in one thing.
Yes.
It also, this is the first time the Korban Pesach has been mentioned. And it's certainly, it's just mentioned here as part of, almost incidentally, as part of everything else, and not as central. Matzah seems to be much more central, which shouldn't be surprising given the Mishnah, but it's just sort of the Pesach suddenly snuck itself in there.
I'll tell you how I understand it. The Pesach is going to get a lot of text. We don't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
Later on, there's going to be a lot of text. We're going to skip most of it, but there is going to be a lot of text. I understand that this is because we're still on the preparation area, getting our things ready. So you can get some, fruit water to put on your Pesach, but only enough to cover it and baste it, not enough to be cooking it in. So we're in the preparations, we're not in the Pesach itself. Okay, let's continue to our next Mishnah. We're going on to Perek Gimel. Elu ovrim Pesach. So here now we're not only at the risk, where are you over? The words here are very tricky because it's not exactly correct. It's you're transgressing something, but not quite clear what exactly. But then we have a list here. Kotacha bavli. So kotach is a kind of a dip that they used to make using flour and some kind of milchik. It was some kind of milchik dip that had in it also flour. Okay, shechar amadi is beer. Shechar is beer. Chometz is vinegar. Zitom mitzri is also some kind of, I don't even remember, you might have, but it's some kind of food that has in it either wheat or barley. So these are different kinds of foods that they're not chametz mamish, but you can't have them on Pesach. Okay, so when you're preparing your meal for the evening, none of these. Vezoman shel tzaba'im, ve'amilan shel tabachin, ve'kolan shel sofrim. So these all things are not even food. These are things that the craftsmen use. Like kolan shel sofrim is the glue that the writers use to stick together the papers. The amilan shel tabachim is the starch that you use to clean things, but not to cook, etc. Meaning we're talking about stuff that you have around the house, but isn't food. It's just things that you use for other stuff. Rabbi Eliezer Omer af tachshitei nashim. Also, if in your tachshitim, we usually think of jewelry. So we're not talking about jewelry, we're more talking about different kinds of cosmetics. So if in your cosmetics you have flowers and powders, it might be something that has chametz in it, but it's not something that you eat. Ze haklal, kol shu mimin dagan, anything that's a grain, harei ze over bepesach, harei elu be'azhara ve'en b'hem mishum karet. Okay, so you should know that it's just, you're warned not to do it, but it's not karet, it's not chametz mamish. It's something you need to make sure you don't have at home. Together with Rabbi Yehuda's OCD, now you have all kinds of kashrut for your bleach and your laundry detergent, right? Okay, so which you don't have to, but we've taken things, we like taking things 5 steps forward. Okay, so what's the topic of our Mishnah? What would you say? What is this Mishnah? Why is it here? What does it want to tell us? Ruth, if you want to talk, you got on mute.
Okay. Yeah, these are things that are also apply to after the 6th hour.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question though?
Yes.
Pesach in the previous Mishnah was the animal, the Korban Pesach. But here, does the Mishnah not distinguish between the name of the holiday, the 14th of being the Pesach and the 15th being Chag HaMatzot? Are they just mushing the two ideas together?
Well, that's a very, very good question. We're going to deal with it a little bit later on. Right now, especially since we were talking about the timeline, obviously the timeline is talking about the 14th. right? We're still on the 14th. It also applies to what's going to come afterwards, but you can understand that we're talking about our problems, our risks, our warnings. We're already talking on the 14th, and we're calling it Pesach, or at least we're hinting that it's called Pesach. Okay, so, but that's a good question. We're going to discuss it a little bit later on. Before I write down the topics that I would like to suggest, I want you to notice something, I think, again, I don't know if we call it cute or amusing, but if you look at the list of the foods here, okay, we have the topic, we have these materials prohibited, whatever, and liable for on Pesach, but what we have here in the list of our things, we have here, I don't know if you noticed, kotach habavli, shechar hamadi, chometz haedomi, zeitom hamitzri. These are all, you can call it authentic, you can call it different kinds of cuisine, but you can also see here a hint for the different galuyot, right? We have galut Mitzrayim, galut Bavel. Afterwards, you have galut Edom and Madai, right? So we have here the different galuyot. These we don't want on Pesach. On Pesach, we're getting rid of all these things. On Pesach, we're celebrating Geula. Okay, it's just this choice of words and which foods they decided to talk about becomes very interesting. Okay, so again, we're still preparation for the evening, and still things that we need to be careful to get rid of.
Wait, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Oh, hey, thanks. With the cosmetic stuff, let's do you actually have to get rid of it or just put it out of sight? That's not.
It really depends on the different kinds, so I don't want to give you okay, because it really depends. Some things that aren't edible at all are not a problem at all, but really you should check it out.
I didn't know, I didn't know if there was a difference between stuff that's actually food or stuff that just might have some, no particulars, right, but just that, you know, you obviously wouldn't eat a cosmetic, but.
Right, exactly. Okay, but I don't want, I don't think I know the exact details enough to be able to say with honesty. Okay, our next Mishnah is Rabban Gamliel Omer, שלוש נשים לשות כאחת ועופות בתנור אחד זו אחר זו. Okay, so Rabban Gamliel is again, you can really see the picture in your mind. You have three women, you have only one oven, so each one of them is making her matzah and then putting it in the oven. וחכמים אומרים שלוש נשים עוסקות בבצק. So you have three women, they're dealing with the dough. אחת לאשה, ואחת עורכת, ואחת עופה. So while one is kneading it, the other one is rolling it out, and the other one has it in the oven. What Chachamim are saying is you don't want to have a line on the way to the oven, because if you're waiting with the dough on the way to the oven, at that time the dough can already become leavened. רבי עקיבא אומר, לא כל הנשים ולא כל העצים ולא כל התנורים שווים. It depends, there are different women, there are different kinds of wood, there are different kinds of ovens. זה הכלל, טפח תלתוש בצונן. So there's a rule, if she sees that it's starting to rise, she should wet it with cold water, and then the dough won't rise. So our concern is that while we're making the matzah, the dough will rise. משנה ה', שאור יישרף ואוכלו פטור. סידוק יישרף ואוכלו חייב כרת. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the matzah itself. If the matzah itself starts having these lines, so there's certain kinds of lines that say that don't look good, because what happens, think about it, when you have like bread that rises, so it expands and then it shrinks again, and that's how we have all kinds of these lines and these wrinkles, so-called. So that already gives us a hint that the dough is rising. So at a certain point, the se'or, you have to burn it. In both cases, you have to burn it, but in the case of the se'or, if you eat it, you're pater. In the case that you really have these cracks in the bread, then it's already considered chametz, and whoever eats it is chayav karet. Ezeu si'ur, so what kind? Kekarnei chagavim. Those really thin lines are called a si'ur. צידוק שנתערבו סדקיו זה בזה. Once the cracks are already intertwined, then it's already a big problem. דברי רבי יהודה, וחכמים אומרים זה וזה האוכלו חייב כרת. According to חכמים, once you have lines, once you have creases, we're already talking about bread that is rising, and therefore you're חייב כרת. וזהו סיעור כל שהחשיפו פניו כאדם שעמדו שערותיו. So I'm not quite sure what this what exactly this means, but it's a certain state of the dough turning into the matzah that turns maybe a different color, it turns white, but nothing that really suggests that the dough is rising. I mean, I don't want to go into all the details, but I do want us, besides the picturesque of the Mishnah, to try to think what this Mishnah is talking about. And again, I think we can agree that we're really getting here into the process of baking the matzah, right? After we went to the store, we got the grains, we got what we needed, we made sure not to make the wrong foods for supper. Now we're baking the matzah. Really, Erev Pesach, you know, all the time when you guys go to take a shower and tell your kids to go take a nap, that's when these women are starting to knead the dough and bake the matzah. So when are we now? Again, we're after the thick sour, preparing for the evening. Again, I skipped a few Mishnayot that regarding burning chametz on the 14th, if the 14th is on Shabbat, or other difficulties when people suddenly remember that they forgot to burn their chametz, etc. And now we're continuing to the next chapter. Chapter 4 starts like this. מקום שנהגו לעשות מלאכה בערבי פסחים עד חצות, עושים. מקום שנהגו שלא לעשות, אין עושים. So, places that they are used to doing melacha on Erev Pesach. Now, Ruth, you asked me before about the name of the day. So we're calling the day here Erev Pesach. Or Pesach, the day, like Erev Pesach in our mind goes together with Erev Shabbos, right? Which means the day before Shabbos. But it can also be, when we say Erev Pesach, we can also mean the evening or the afternoon in which you bring Korban Pesach. So there's something here that can be a dual meaning, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So what do we have here? So some places, their minhag is to do melacha until noon. Then they can do melacha until noon. Makom shenagu shelo la'asot en osim. So now we learn that there's a minhag in some places not to do melacha until chatzot, meaning to stop doing melacha even before. I don't know for how many of you this is something new. I remember when I learned this Mishnayot, and I wasn't in 5th grade, I was much later. What, you're not allowed to do melacha on Erev Pesach? So now we're finding out that I guess not. Now, we're not talking about all kinds of melacha. As we all know, different days have different isur melacha. Shabbat is a certain kind of isur melacha. Yom Tov is a certain kind of isur melacha. Chol HaMoed is a certain kind of isur melacha. So if we want a certain kind of framework, you can think of Erev Pesach similarly to what's it called? To Chol HaMoed. Okay? Not all of the melachot, some of the melachot. Anyway, so I'm starting again from the beginning of the Mishnah. מקום שנהגו לעשות מלאכה בערבי פסחים עד חצות עושים, מקום שנהגו שלא לעשות אין עושים. It depends on the custom in each place. ההולך ממקום שעושים למקום שאין עושים, או ממקום שאין עושים למקום שעושים. Okay, so if you come from one place and you go to another place, נותנים עליו חומרי מקום שיצא משם וחומרי מקום שהלך לשם. You do according to the chumras of both places, okay? ואל ישנה אדם מפני המחלוקת. But you shouldn't do things differently in order not to be in disagreement with other people. Now, this becomes very delicate. How can you both do all the chumrot and also not step on anyone's toes and not show that you're doing things differently? So that's a whole big question that we're not going to deal with right now. Okay, so what do we have here? The Mishnah here, what's the topic of the Mishnah? How would you define the topic of the Mishnah?
Same thing. Oh no, well, things that you. Oh, it's all under the things that you have to prepare for the Pesach.
That's an interesting. Do we talk here about preparation for Pesach? Does this Mishnah talk about preparation for Pesach? It's not talking about
No.
what you do. It's talking about what you
Can't
don't do.
do.
Right?
Right.
Okay. So how would you define this Mishnah? Ruth, you're on mute.
Just as you said, things you can't do, or things you shouldn't do, or things you might not want to do.
Okay, so let's see what I wrote here. We're back to the division of the day, but this time we're regarding work. What work you're allowed to do, work, craft, malach, how do you? Yes, Michael.
But it also, makom is mentioned again over and over, and it's a different understanding of makom. In terms of makom, you know, in the first couple of Mishnayot, makom is a place where you're worried about chametz being there. Here, it's about, you're still worried about something, about melacha, but it seems to be, though, a different sense of place, though.
Okay. Interesting. We'll try to see how we can bring that in later on. Okay, but I again, you're noticing the makom and I'm noticing the times. So, but now, in a sense, we're going back to the day division and we're bringing in the times again, but it's sort of parallel to the times we've been talking up to now, right? So up till now, we'll be talking about food, right? We talked about getting rid of certain kinds of food, getting rid of our chametz, going shopping, and preparing for the evening. Now we're going back to the more or less the same timeline. We're starting maybe in the morning, we'll get back to that later, and we're stopping melacha either until chatzot or from after chatzot. Everyone agrees that from chatzot, from noon and onward, you're not allowed to do melacha. That everyone agrees, but we have different customs here as to when exactly we stop doing melacha. Okay, I'm going to our next Mishnah, and here Mishnah is going to be a little bit surprising. Mishnah Gimel. מקום שנהגו למכור בהמה דקה לעובד רגילים, מוכרים. מקום שנהגו שלא למכור, אין מוכרים. So בהמה דקה is it's not a cattle, it's like livestock, but it's like the goats and the sheep and things like that, the smaller animals. So some places you do have the minhag to sell it to the idol worshippers, in some places you don't. Maybe you're worried that they might be using it as sacrifices or something like that. But every place you don't give them the cattle, agalim, v'siachim, shlamim, ushvurim, also different kinds of horses. Rabbi Yehuda matir b'shvura, ben betera matir b'sus. So Rabbi Yehuda allows it if it's broken, because then you can't sacrifice it. Ben betera allows a horse because you're assuming that they're going to use it to ride, etc. מקום שנהגו לאכול צלי בלילי פסחים אוכלים. מקום שנהגו שלא לאכול אין אוכלים. So we had different minhagim whether or not you're allowed to eat roasted meat on the night of Pesach. Okay, some places they did, some places they didn't. מקום שנהגו להדליק את הנר בלילי יום הכיפורים, מדליקים. מקום שנהגו שלא להדליק, אין מדליקים. We have different minhagim whether or not you light candles on the eve of Yom Kippur. Some places do, some places don't. It might have to do with the fact that you don't need to eat supper. So maybe you don't need light. So you can decide whether or not you need the light or you don't need the light. ומדליקים בבתי כנסיות ובבתי מדרשות. You do light it in the shul and in the places of learning. ובמבואות האפלים and in dark alleys. ועל גבי החולים, and when there are people that are sick. Okay, there's a more Mishnayot that continue in the same venue, but what are these Mishnayot talking about? Okay, I see a surprised look on your face. Why? Because what's this doing here, okay? Or as I like to call it, off topic. It's not totally off topic because we were just talking about minhagim. So, you know what? We're talking about minhagim. Let's continue talking about minhagim, right? Where this, some will say this is just associative. We've been talking about minhagim. Let's just put in everything else we know about minhagim. And we can see it in many places that it feels like the Mishnah is associative. When you go to the Gemara, it's even more apparent. And, once we were already talking about it, let's just stick in here everything we have to say in the topic. If you've been in my classes long enough, you can already guess that I'm going to try to look for a more substantial meaning for why this is here. And this is already our first question. Okay. Later on, it will go back to the different kinds of work that you're allowed to do on 14th of Nisan. You're allowed, you're not allowed. We're going to see that later on. Okay. Just a beginning a little bit in chapter Hey. So Michael was complaining, or someone else was complaining, we didn't talk about the Pesach enough. So most of Parak is talking about the Pesach, but I just brought you one Mishnah because it's one of the nicer ones. HaPesach nishchat b'shalosh katot. So the Pesach, Korban Pesach, is slaughtered in 3 groups. Sheneemar v'shechatu oto kol kehal adat Yisrael. Kehal ve'eda v'Yisrael. So the whole of the group of Israel. So we have 3 groups here in which we're slaughtering the animal. I'll just say, we don't have time for this, but I'm just going to say that I think that the way that Chazal told us that we slaughter the animals in groups sort of gives us a bit of the essence of Korban Pesach, which is a family Korban. So even though everybody's shechting it together, we're still giving the feeling that it's more personal, like it's a group Korban and not everybody together. So that's why we divided up the slaughtering into different groups. Okay, so here we have the slaughtering of Korban Pesach, right? That's our topic. And in terms of time, again, we're after the 6 hours that was said in the beginning of the chapter. It's even a little bit after the 6 hours, 6.5 hours, but later on. Okay, now what do I want to do? I'm going to give you a brief summary of the rest of the chapters, and then we can go back and discuss some of the things that we saw. So chapter 6, we're going to have a discussion what do you do when there's Korban Pesach on Shabbat, what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. Chapter 7 is going to talk about roasting the Pesach. How do you do it? What can you use? How is it done? Exactly. Chapter Chet will talk about the chabura of the Pesach. Who do you eat with? Who's in the group? Who's out as a group? The definition of the chabura even comes out nice. Parak Chet, chabura. Parak Tet is Pesach Sheni. This also comes out nice because in Bamidbar Parak Tet is Pesach Sheni. And Parak Yud is Leila Seder. Okay, so you can see that we're continuing with Korban Pesach so that you don't say that we didn't give enough thought to the Korban. In terms of our timeline, we're already getting closer to the night, right? Because we're roasting our Korban Pesach, and afterwards we have Leila Seder, which is the eve of Tetvav. We more or less finished from the evening of Yudalet until the evening of Tetvav. Those of you who were here the previous semester, we studied Parak Yud of the Mishnah together, and we dealt with it on its own. So those of you who are interested and want to prepare for Pesach, you can ask the office if they have the recording. Okay, so what do I want to do now? First of all, let's see what we've seen. What have we seen? We've seen that there's a chronological order to the Mishnah. Okay? I think you can really see, we put it here on the side of the board, and you can see we started in the evening and we continued all the way till the next evening. What's nice is I didn't show it here, but really the almost last Mishnah of the Masechet ends at midnight. Okay, us and Cinderella together. So we have this chronological order. We have here's a preparation for Pesach. We searched for the chametz, we got rid of it, we prepared the foods, and we're slaughtering the korban. We have the whole deal together. And we had this off-topic issue of these customs. Okay, we had this whole text dealing with customs. Some of them had to do with Pesach. It started with doing melacha on Erev Pesach. It also stuck in the question of whether or not you can have roasted food on Erev Pesach, but it also dealt with other kinds of customs, like selling things to the idol worshippers, like lighting candles on Yom Kippur, etc. So what I want to do now is I have 2 questions, okay? Question number 1, we have here a timeline, and I want to know, how do you choose, how do you decide where to start the timeline? Why are we starting it on the evening of Yud Aleph? Like, where do you decide, if you're doing a timeline, where do you decide to start? And in a second, I'll show you that we had other options, okay? We had different times that we can start our timeline. Okay? Just for example, we have other Mishnah, we have other Masechtot in the Mishnah that have a timeline. Mishnah Masechet Shabbos starts on Erev Shabbos in the afternoon. Okay, when you're preparing for Shabbos, but a few hours before Shabbos. The Mishnah of Yoma starts 7 days before Yom Kippur. So part of our question is, okay, if you've decided to have a chronological order to the Mishnah, how do you decide where to start? Now on Pesach, this is always a very, very important question. When do you start preparing for Pesach? Okay. Now, the men in the crowd, I don't know how much you're aware of how important the question this is. Okay. Do you start on Hanukkah? Do you start on Tu B'Shvat? Do you start on Purim? When do you start, right, cleaning the cupboards? Okay. When do you start refolding all the clothes in the closet? Right. That's a very important question of how you prepare for Pesach. So the question, where does the Pesach preparation start? This is a very crucial question. And what I want to know is how the Mishnah decided to start over there. Okay. I'll even add, none of us today start searching for chametz the night before Leila Seder. Right? Okay. Next question is, why bring in this off topic? Why bring in all this question of customs and stick it in the middle of Pesach? So I want to sort of start with our second question, but not exactly with the off topic, but to go back to the question of doing melacha on Arvei Pesach. Right? So we discussed makom shenagu la'asot melacha be'arvei pesachim achatzot osim, makom shenagu shelo la'asot en osim. So we have those who do until chatzot and those who don't. Okay. The question is, why can't one do melacha? Why don't you do melacha on Erev Pesach? So what do you think? Why don't you do melacha on Erev Pesach? Whether you don't do it from noon or even before noon. Why not?
Because you should be preparing for Pesach.
Okay.
You shouldn't be diverted.
Okay, good answer. Any other answers?
I didn't get a chance to look it up, but isn't the 14th, which is the Pesach, isn't that a Mikra Kodesh?
Okay, so that's a good answer. Okay, and we're going to also ask why it's dependent on custom, but let's go back to the answers that you gave. Okay, what isn't dependent on custom? That's from Chatzot and later on, but let's see the different options. Okay, so you're together with Rashi. Ruth, you're together with Tosfot. Okay, so what does Rashi say? The places that don't do melacha, shelo la'asot, כדי שלא יהיה טרוד במלאכה וישכח ביעור חמצו ושחיטת הפסח ותיקון מצה לצורך הלילה. דמצווה לטרוח מבעוד יום כדי להסב מהר. Why do you stop doing מלאכה? So you won't be doing other things. You won't be preoccupied, and then you'll forget to burn your chametz in the middle of the day and to slaughter your Pesach in the afternoon and to prepare your matzah afternoon, late afternoon. The mitzvah litroach mibod yom, you need to make sure your matzah is made before the evening. So in the evening, you can sit down and be all ready to eat. So don't be preoccupied. Stop doing everything else and be focused on making the food for the evening. That's what Rashi said, just like Saul. What does Tosfot say? Makom shenagu omer ri b'shem riva. Okay, one of them in the name of the others. De mefaresh beYerushalmi. We have an answer in the Yerushalmi. Why is Erev Pesach different than other Yom Tov? Why in other Yom Tovs we don't stop doing melacha at noon or in the morning or whatever? Mishum zman Pesach michatzot ve'elach. You need to bring the korban Pesach from noon. The af yachid, even regarding a private person, an individual, kamar hatam, it says there bish'al yemot hashana, and the rest of the year. Beyom shemivli korban asur b'melacha. On a day that a person brings a korban, he doesn't do melacha. He's focused, not necessarily in terms of what he's doing, but in terms of his mind. He's focused on what's it called? He's focused on doing the korban, and being in a kadosh state of mind. Okay, Ruth is adding it's also a mikra kodesh according to the Ikra of Gimel. It's a holiday. Now these are two ways of looking at this day. Are we stopping melacha because it's an important day? Or are we stopping melacha because we're preparing for the evening? This is two ways of actually looking at the 14th of Nisan. Okay, second. Okay, so according to Rashi, it's to prepare for the evening. According to Tosfot, it's because of the korban. But then the question would be, wait, if the korban is only from the middle of the day, why don't we stop our melacha in the middle of the day? Where did the idea come to stop melacha from before? Okay, let's continue. Later on in the parak, we have another Mishnah that we didn't see yet. The Chachamim omrim, beYehuda hayu osim melacha b'arvei psachim ad chatzot. So Chachamim said, in Judah, until chatzot, people would do melacha. They'd stop only at chatzot, only at noon. Bagalil lo hayu osim kol ikar. In the Galil, they wouldn't do melacha. What does that mean that they didn't do melacha? The halayla, the night before, Beit Shammai usin, uvet Hillel metirin ad netzach hama. So those who wouldn't do melacha, according to Beit Shammai, they would stop already the evening before. According to Beit Hillel, you could do melacha until sunrise. Now this is interesting. Some places even stopped, according to Beit Shammai, doing melacha the night before. So if we go back to the timeline that we saw before, right? We had the evening of Yudalet, we had the morning, we had the 4th, 5th, 6th hour, we had after. So we can see that the questions of melacha sort of parallel to the times that we saw that have to do with the food, right? Because according to Beit Shammai in the Galil, they stopped already in the evening, the time of Dikat Chametz. According to Beit Hillel, they would stop in the morning. And everyone agrees that Judah would stop noon and onward. So we have this sort of parallel between the times. Now, when I ask myself, what other timeline was optional, I could go back to the Torah. Parshat Bo, Parak Yud Bet, gives us a different timeline, right? It starts with HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodeshim Rishonu Lachem Lechodshei Shana. So we start with Rosh Chodesh. דברו על כל הדעת ישראל לאמור בעשור לחודש הזה ויקחו לכם איש צא לבית אבות צא לבית. So when we have the 10th of Nisan and we have the whole discussion if you don't have enough people etc. I'm skipping to verse ו' והיה לכם משמרת עד 14 יום לחודש הזה ושחטו אותו כל קהל הדעת ישראל בין הערביים. So now we're the 14th of Nisan in the afternoon. ולקחו מן הדם etc. פסוק ח' ואכלו את הבשר בלילה הזה. So we have the eve of the 15th of Nisan, and how you're allowed to eat it, pasuk yud, ולא תותירו ממנו עד בוקר, ונותר ממנו עד בוקר באש תשרוף. So, why am I interested? Because the Mishnah is giving us a different timeline. The Torah gave us a timeline. It starts at Rosh Chodesh, and it continues until Tet-Vav. It also continues another 7 days, which a Mishnah of Psachim doesn't talk about at all, right? But so now the question is, how do we deal with the connection between these timelines, right? Why did the Mishnah choose the timeline on the left, whereas the Torah gave us a timeline on the right? Now, if we think about it, the Torah starts 2 weeks before, and then 10 days before. But let's say we're starting in Yudalet. As far as the Torah is concerned, Yudalet starts in the middle of the day. Then we continue to the evening of Tet-Vav, and then we get to the morning of Tet-Vav. Okay? That's the way the Torah is thinking. But Chazal give us a different timeline, which starts with evening, day, right? We have, it's a little bit different. How is it different? It's normal. Meaning, that's the way we're used to working. Evening, morning, right? That's the way we're not used to thinking about days in terms of midday, something new is beginning, right? So now, I want to go back to searching for chametz, and the question why we start searching for chametz the night before. So the Gemara says, and this is also what Rashi says, Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, why do you check the night before? B'sha'ah shebnei adam mitzuim bevatehem ve'or haner yafeh lebdika. It's convenient. It's a good time to check for chametz. It's night, the candle burns bright, and everybody's home, and we can do it all together. But according to the Mechivta de Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, there's a source, a Tannaitic source, it's not from the Mishnah. It says, "Ushmotem et hayom hazeh." You need to keep this day. Shomrehu min fanav. Guard it from the beginning. Mikan amru or 14 bodkim et hachametz leoranir. According to the Mechivta, we have to have this day as a day guarded from chametz. It's a definition of the day. The Yud Dalet of Nisan is a day that we guard from chametz. So we start at the beginning of the day searching for chametz, and then later on we're also going to burn the chametz. So if we go back to the different timelines that we had, in a sense, what do we see in Chazal? We see a certain kind of adaptation of the Torah time anomaly to regular times. The Torah started in the middle of the day, we're going back to the beginning of the day, or we're going back to the morning. We're trying to make Yudaled a day that we can grasp, we can figure out, times that we're used to using. But there might be two understandings in why we're doing it. One understanding is understanding the 14th as a significant day. This is Chag HaPesach, the 14th of Nisan. And we're going to start this Chag the way we know how to start Chagim, at the night before. Or maybe in the morning, we'll become halfway, right? Or maybe it's an understanding of the 14th as a day of preparation, that we would like to, dedicate the day to prepare. It's not because it's a special day. We're only getting ready for the 15th, but we need to set time aside to do it and make sure that things are getting done, have everybody at home, make sure people aren't doing work. Okay, so there are two ways of looking at how we want to define the 14th. Do we want to go with Saul, or do we want to go with Ruth? Do we want to go with Rashi? Do we want to go with Tosfot? There are different options. Because there are different options, we also get different customs, right? There's those who say, we want this day to be special. Let's stop doing malachas the night before. And some say, it's enough for us to do it just in the afternoon and it's okay. There are different ways at looking at things. And therefore, we're going to find all kinds of different customs, because the different customs really portray the different ways to understand the day. But I want to say just one last thing, okay? I think that the choice the Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi made of putting the different customs into the Mishnah is also a statement about Pesach in general. A statement about Pesach in general is a time where we're passing down our tradition from us to our children, to our grandchildren, and from our parents in the previous generations. And the way we do it is with a certain kind of self-interpretation. Our customs portrays the way we understand how things are working. And each family has different customs. And I think Layla Seder is like one of the evenings where these family customs are heightened. Now, it also happens that sometimes you go from one place to another. You get married and then you come into a different family and you find different customs. How do you deal with these different customs? So the fact that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi decided to put in this whole block of Mishnah that has to do with customs, it's also a way of saying, you know what? Everything we're doing now, all the things we're doing, we're getting rid of our chametz and we're preparing the food. This is all for sharing our legacy, for passing things on, for creating our customs. So I want my discussion on customs to be in this Masechet. I want this to highlight the idea of Pesach, not only as food, not only as stopping to do things, but also what are we passing on? What are we creating here? What are we giving our children to take with them on? That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Stop sharing. If anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to try my best to answer.
Thank
I'm
you
happy to give a few
much.
more minutes for
Thank you very
questions.
much for your insight.
Yes,
Saul?
I have a question. I mean, aren't the rabbis also dealing with the difficulties of Pesach Mitzrayim and where we are now and the lack of the Beis Hamikdash? So korbanot are strange, they're gone. So what we have to figure out what we're going to do from now on without the middle. And this is one of the instances where the Torah is really good because there had to be a beginning. So if we want to do how to continue, we have to take another look at how we began.
Okay. And also, I don't know if you noticed, but all of the chapters of Korban Pesach I kind of left out, and we still had a lot to discuss. Meaning there's still a lot of content and a lot to do, even if the chapters of the Korban Pesach are there. We're not, the Mishnah doesn't leave them out, but it also gives us a lot of basis to talk and to discuss, even if we don't have the Korban itself.
Right, but it gives us the responsibility to do it as opposed to a Kohen and the slaughtering, and
That's true too.
so it's now our problem from beginning to end, not just to pick it up.
That's true, definitely. Yes. Anyone else? Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you again next week.
Yeah, toda.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you to Dr. Sternberg for today's wonderful class. And to everyone, thank you for joining us. I hope to see you in other classes going on at Drisha this month. If you want to find out more about our ongoing classes, please check out our website at drisha.org/classes. And have a good day.
You too. Thank you.